Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay for our Planning Council meeting of Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories they have traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply respect the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, under, and above it. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we want to thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this place and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth and reconciliation. Miigwech. Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? All sorts of heads shaking. Madam Clerk, any open forum candidates for this morning?
Yes, Your Worship. I have 3 people that are pre-registered, 2 of which I see online. Do you want me to bring them over?
Okay. And no, anyone in the crowd register for open forum? Okay, we're just going to go to the online folks. Thank you.
So I'm promoting Ms. Elliott Fraser and Mr. McKay. Yes.
Mr. McKay or Mackay, how do you prefer?
I prefer Mackay. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Mackay.
Yes.
Next 2 minutes are yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. And good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Ted Mackay. I'm a property owner on 6 Mile Lake. I'm also a member of the Floating Accommodations Not Vessels Coalition, of which you may have heard. We've been working for several years to highlight the problems and the risks associated with floating accommodations and to have them prohibited or regulated. I'm speaking this morning to express our strong support for the proposed bylaw amendment, which you have before you, which would prohibit floating accommodations in Georgian Bay Township. The planning document, which is an excellent read, very nicely prepared, very accurately describes the potential hazards of floating accommodations. So I will not repeat them all, but they do include environmental, navigation, taxation, and other problems. So the coalition is very pleased to see the Township of Georgian Bay take effective action on floating accommodations and to join similar actions taken by Severn Township, Parks Canada, and the Ministry of Natural Resources of Ontario. We are also, as a coalition, encouraging other municipalities in Ontario to follow your strong lead and leadership on this issue. And so we thank you very much for taking this very important and decisive step to prohibit floating accommodations in the township. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mackay.
Okay.
Do we have anyone else in open forum?
I had Ms. Elliott Fraser registered, but she would need to accept the panelist promotion.
All right. Okay. Ms. Elliott Fraser. There we go.
Hi, good morning. I just want to thank the council for everything that they have put forward regarding the floating accommodations. Mr. Mackay has spoken on behalf of the Floating Homes, Not Vessels Coalition, and so he's been a representative. So as I said, we fully support everything that the council is doing, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anyone else? No. Okay. Well, that concludes the open forum portion. And we don't have any Municipal Act public meetings today. So we're now going to go into the Planning Act public meetings portion of our meeting. Does that mean I have to do a little speech? That's this. I get to do a little speech for that. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for one proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I'll briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendments being considered. The clerk will also advise of the appeal procedures. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the amendments being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address and sign in on the sheet provided. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendments. Zoning Bylaw Amendment File Z25-07 for 57 Port Severn Road North. To our clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the applications. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed applications and a key map showing the location of the properties or a description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may have also been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on these applications, that any subsequent appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendments must submit a written request to the planning department. Correspondence relating to zoning bylaw amendments Z25-01 was received as follows. One letter was received from the District of Muskoka stating they have no objection to the application. One letter was received from Kelly Nicholson, Chief Building Official, stating building permits will be required. One letter was received from the Ministry of Transportation stating they have no concerns or objections to the proposed rezoning. They stated, however, placement of any buildings or structures on site, grading or paving within 395 meters at the center point of the intersection of Highway 400 and Port Severn Road will require an MTO building land use permit, and any future development or change in land must be subject to MTO review.
Thank you very much. At this time, I think we'll turn it over to Ms. Wanfor to give us the overview of the application and the information gathered to date and the effect of the bylaw. Ms. Wanfor.
Oops. Through the mayor. The subject property has an area of 2,770 square meters and a frontage of 178.6 meters on Port Severn Road North and a frontage of 143.5 meters on Little Lake. The lands are located in the urban center of Port Severn and designated residential within the township's official plan. A narrow water body and type 2 fish habitat abut the lands, which are identified as having high to very high archaeological potential. The lands are zoned residential type 4. The Committee of Adjustment conditionally approved consent application B2409 on December 13, 2024. The purpose and effect of the application was to sever 840 square meters of land with a frontage of 20 meters on Port Severn Road North, resulting in the lot configurations noted in this table on my screen. In the associated recommendation report, staff cited previous Planning Act applications which resulted in 750 square meters of land with a frontage of 20 meters being severed from 57 Port Severn Road North, being the subject lands, and rezoned to permit a 20-meter frontage, an 11-meter front yard, and prohibit shoreline structures. Similarly, during the public hearing for B2409, staff identified the need for a zoning bylaw amendment to permit a 20-meter lot frontage and recommended that the site-specific zoning also prohibit shoreline structures due to the presence of a boat launch and to be consistent with previous staff's recommendation for B0417. The decision of the Committee of Adjustment requires the applicant to obtain a zoning bylaw amendment as a condition of approval. The purpose of this zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone 840 square meters of the subject lands from a residential type 4 zone to a residential type 4 exception zone. The effect of the rezoning is to facilitate development on the lands, which will have a reduced lot frontage of 20 meters, permit a detached dwelling, and prohibit shoreline structures, as contemplated and conditionally approved by the Committee of Adjustment via consent application B2409 on December 13th. The provincial planning statement states that settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development and also requires planning authorities to support general intensification and redevelopment. Objectives of the district's urban center land use designation include supporting the efficient use of land and infrastructure, ensuring there is adequate supply of land and housing choices available, promoting the efficient use of existing and planned infrastructure and public service facilities by supporting opportunities for various forms of intensification, etc. As outlined in the Township's official plan, objectives of the urban center of Port Severn include, but are not limited to, encouraging economic development which complements the existing community, and to provide and encourage opportunities for second home and permanent residential development. In accordance with the official plan, residential development may include a broad range of dwelling structures from single detached dwelling to multiple unit development, and residential growth should proceed by infilling in and intensification of existing residential areas. A narrow water body is defined in the official plan as a water body on a lake which has a minimum distance of less than 150 meters from shoreline to shoreline. The lands abut the portion of Little Lake which leads to the township's boat launch, measuring 20 meters wide. A policy of the plan states where a narrow water body exists, an increased lot frontage shall be required, and a lot frontage of up to 120 meters may be imposed. In order to determine if the lot frontage should be increased, regards should be made for the severity of the narrowness of the channel and the impact of the development on water quality, density, navigation, and channel congestion, views, and other matters as deemed appropriate by the township. To confirm, the lands will not be accessed by water, and the zoning bylaw amendment will prohibit shoreline structures. The zoning bylaw amendment will allow for the lot to have a reduced frontage of 20 meters, whereas properties having waterfront in the R4 zone are required to have a minimum lot frontage of 60 meters. The remainder of the R4 zone requirements will continue to apply. A detailed analysis of the application is contained within staff's report. During the public hearing for consent on December 13th, no members of the public attended or provided written correspondence. In alignment with the township's strategic plan pillar to streamline planning policies and procedures, staff have prepared a recommendation report and draft bylaw for council's approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant or agent present, and do they wish to make any comments? No, you're not required. It's an option that we offer you. So then, after that, I have to ask whether any members of the public wish to make any comments with regards to this file. I'm seeing heads shaking, and there's no one online, I think, no. All right. Boy, we got through that part quickly. That means I get to turn this over to council and ask if council have any comments, and we're going to start with Councillor Bocek, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I've visited this property quite a few times, and perhaps one of the things that wasn't stated in this report is that it is on municipal sewers and water. And if I could have that confirmed just before we go on.
Through the mayor, yes, the property will be serviced.
Okay, so the property is serviced with sewers and water. And the other thing I had a concern was the setback. But in review of roll up and water increases and things like that, the water in Little Lake seems to be stable within 6 inches depending on the season. So I really don't have any problems with this application whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I know that we have a situation up there where land that is owned is underwater. And when you presented the location map, attachment 1 with subject lands, the indication is a significant amount of land for what's retained, but the ultimate, all of it is a good significant portion of it's underwater. Is the portion that you indicate in the retained lands include what's underwater?
Through the mayor, no, the lot area provided and mentioned in this presentation is above the regulated water mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief question for our planner. Did I misunderstand you? Did you say that this is not accessible by water?
Through the mayor, that is correct. The property will have to be accessed from Port Severn Road North.
So there won't be any, is this not waterfront?
The lands will front onto water, but they will not be allowed to have any docks or any accessory structures in that yard between the dwelling and the water.
For this new lot, the other property could or would, but is that correct?
Through the mayor, that is correct, and I believe the lands to be retained also have a dock or two.
I see. Okay, so it's road access only in reality, even though it's on waterfront. Rather unusual. So you could go in and pull something on shore, but you just aren't allowed to have a dock, essentially. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, that is correct. No accessory buildings or structures.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, council. So I'm going to go to the motion. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Graziano. Be it resolved, the council receives Development Services Report 2025-046 and approves Bylaw 2025-031, being a zoning bylaw amendment Z25-01 to rezone the lands legally described as Part 1 and part of Parts 2 and 3 on Plan 35R-7197 Port Severn Road, formerly Lot 28, Concession 2 Baxter, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, District Municipality of Muskoka, from a residential type 4 zone or R4 to a residential type 4 exception zone R4-22. Seeing no more hands, I'm going to ask all those in favor. And that is passed. Thank you very much. And that concludes the Planning Act public meeting portion of the agenda. All comments, questions, and concerns raised at the public meeting have been recorded and will be taken into consideration by staff. Well, I guess we've already made the recommendation. We don't need that. No. So I declare this public meeting closed at 9:19. All right. Thank you very much. And now, item 8 on our agenda is the Vision 2050 Project Advisory Council by the Georgian Bay Association. And I see we have Mr. Jones and Mr. Carson as part of our meeting. Gentlemen, over to you.
Good morning, and it's Rolfe Jones here. Good morning, and thank you, Your Worship, and fellow councillors and TGB staff for allowing John Carson. Hopefully you can hear me. It says use video, so I'm going to take another shot at producing my my visage on your screens. But thanks for allowing us to come in and speak to you today about this important initiative. Those who know me, I will be brief, and please no comments from those who do know me, because I do like to chat. I think it's safe to say that Georgian Bay is our spiritual home, and I think to a lot of us, I think we would also say that we need to do more to protect the Bay because we just love and cherish it so much. The Georgian Bay Association is working towards a vision to protect the eastern and northern coasts of the Bay.
Mr. Jones, I'm going to interrupt you right immediately. Do you want anybody to be sharing the screen with the pictorials that will go with your chat?
Yes. I understand. Do you have our presentation, or John, will you be sharing it?
The clerk has volunteered to share that. I just wanted to make sure that we were, shall we say, singing from the same song sheet.
Yes, indeed, we are. I thought I would do a little soft shoe and then introduce John, and I'm almost there.
So soft shoe.
But basically, we've presented this to many key stakeholders, and people all have agreed that this is a very important initiative. And so before I turn it over to John to speak to this initiative, I'd just like to say to everybody that is on council that GBA really and truly appreciates your support, both through the grant monies that you've given us, as well as your early input towards this initiative. So I'll turn it over to John Carson, our chair.
Thank you, Rolfe, and good morning. I have a short update to share with you, a brief request, and we'll take questions following that. So as you may recall from past presentations, our tagline is all about bringing communities and stakeholders together. We don't see this really as a GBA initiative per se, but a collaborative effort. Next slide, please. Our mission statement focuses on conservation and protection of the unique natural environment and ecosystems of the Bay into the future. A few months ago, we amended this mission statement to add, while supporting sustainable communities. That's a very important addition from the standpoint of economic and social development in all forms of communities, whether they be permanent residents, seasonal residents, First Nations, urban, semi-urban. There are many communities up and down the east and northern coasts of the Bay, and we need to take care of those communities. This vision and mission aligns with the Township strategy to protect and preserve the Bay for future generations. Next slide, please. So this is very much a conceptual illustration of what we're calling the policy framework gap. And that's because there really isn't any provincial policy or regional plan that recognizes this very special area. There have been efforts to create such a plan or recognition going back a number of decades, but since the early 90s, nothing concrete has come forward. This just illustrates that in other areas of the province, particularly Southern Ontario, there are recognized conserved areas. Here we see the Greenbelt and the Niagara Escarpment. The escarpment is officially part of the Greenbelt. So we're asking why we shouldn't recognize the eastern side of Georgian Bay in an approach along these lines. But when we say along these lines, again, this is a concept. How this might be achieved and through what kind of policy framework is what this project is all about. and we need to have a consensus of stakeholders on any such approach. So that's what we're trying to develop here. However, we do believe and hope that this would lead to some form of recognition in the official conservation and planning policy framework of Ontario. We do want to clarify that it doesn't mean a regional planning authority. One thing that many will note about the escarpment is that it has a Niagara Escarpment Commission that is a planning authority and is quite bureaucratic. We don't have anything of that nature in mind here. We don't believe that would garner support from stakeholders, nor do we believe it would produce the best results. But we do have in mind a higher level form of protection, which might be through guiding principles, for example. Next slide, please. So this map, which has recently been done for our project along with 27 other maps, we're really showing it here just to illustrate the study area. Again, this is not definitive. This is open for debate and discussion, but this is what we initially have in mind, the area within the purple line there, leading into the North Channel. The southern portion very much aligns with the current boundaries of the Georgian Bay biosphere. And this map also illustrates currently conserved areas, First Nations and so on, mainly through parks and conservation reserves. So a lot of the area, yes, has conservation of various forms in place now. We see that as a reason to pursue better protection, not a reason to sit on our hands. Next slide, please. So phase one of the project, just to remind you, is to retain well-recognized conservation and coastal regional planning experts to write a position paper. And when we say regional planning experts, this is quite a different form of planning expertise that one typically finds in many planning consulting firms. So it is a challenge to find the right people to write this report. The report will mainly accomplish three things. One, it will analyze the increasing threats to the natural environment of the coastal region, mainly stemming from the explosive growth of southern Ontario and the various impacts that growth has on the broader region. It will then propose a vision for the future of the Georgian Bay coastal region that prioritizes conservation, but as I said, recognizes the need to take care of the health and vibrancy of our communities. And thirdly, it will identify a proposed regional conservation policy framework or approach. That could be, in fact, more than one alternative, depending on how the work unfolds. The policy proposals in the paper will be based significantly on both broad-based consultations with all the stakeholders, as well as research into recognized conservation principles and best practices, whether that be within Canada or internationally. And in fact, there are many principles in place, recognized principles, and many useful precedents that we can look to. Next slide, please. So in terms of progress, we've made quite a bit of progress recently, including with widespread engagement with stakeholders, many types of stakeholders. We'll see that on the next slide. We recently made a successful delegation to the Township of the Archipelago. Our presentation, which is basically the same presentation, was very well received, and they have appointed a counselor to our advisory council. In fact, they attempted to appoint two counselors, but we're not quite ready for that yet due to the need to manage the numbers. So working with some of our other NGO partners, we've started to build a coalition towards moving this initiative forward. We've developed a comprehensive communication strategy, not all of which, but parts of which have yet to be rolled out as the project unfolds. We've collected a significant amount of important data and information on the current status of the environment and communities in the region and the challenges that it faces. We've completed initial mapping of the region. And finally, we've set up this advisory council that is composed of key stakeholders and experts. So we have commitments from the Biosphere, Georgian Bay Forever, and the Land Trust to participate through senior leadership people. We are working on getting participation from municipalities, and we'll appoint a few independent experts. For example, Neil Davis is one person who is joining us on this council. We have a delegation to northeastern Manitoulin and the islands later this week. We have applied to appear before Carling Council, Township of Carling Council in May, and we will shortly be approaching the municipality of Killarney to appear before their council. So we'll be working with these partners to identify the best approach to garnering Indigenous communities' input.
Mr. Carson,
Sorry?
you've reached your 10 minutes, so if you could just move at a reasonable pace to your conclusion, it would be appreciated.
Yes, no problem. Next slide, please. So the themes of this project are very much collaboration, consultations, and building a coalition. As I've described, in the box on the right there, you see a list of many of the organizations that we have presented to and reached out to. Next slide, please. We've one more slide after this. This just basically illustrates the process of the current phase of the project. It's early days yet. We're at information sharing. I want to point out there's two stages of consultations in this part of the process. One is to garner input into development of the position paper. The second is a comprehensive set of consultations on the results of the position paper and the proposals that it makes. Next. And finally, we have two requests of Township Council. The first is one that will unfold on an ongoing basis, but we would certainly like to hear input on how our project can best support the township strategy to protect and preserve the natural environment. That's something that we can discuss discuss going forward. And secondly, today we are requesting that you appoint a representative to sit on our advisory council. And we did circulate the mandate for that council with our materials. That's our presentation, Your Worship.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over to council if they have any questions or comments. But before I do that, I notice under new business that Councillor Hazelton had introduced a proposed that we make that appointment, and I'm going to suggest that we just combine that item on our agenda with your indulgence with this discussion. We'll do it all at once because I think it's just practical to do that. So I'm turning it over to council for any comments or questions, and also then I will turn it over to Councillor Hazelton to introduce his item as part of that whole discussion. But we're going to start with Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you both Mr. Jones and Mr. Carson. Excellent presentation. And I just wanted to say these are going to be comments really. It's an admirable goal that you have, and I hope it's achievable. It's a very exciting goal in my mind to have sort of a conservation area of sorts along the eastern shores of Georgian Bay and the North Channel. It's would benefit all our communities. And I think it's important to point out that each and every citizen that's in there enlightened self-interest, a favorite phrase of mine, enlightened self-interest for all our constituents to preserve this area as much as we possibly can in a pristine way. And so I wanted to mention that. And I guess just one question, though, to Mr. Carson. In the presentation, you showed a map with the area that's covered. And I just wondered what the northwestern extension is, how far it goes into the North Channel. Does it go past Little Current? It looks like it goes past Killarney. Little Current, does it include the Benjamin Islands, for example, or it's short of that?
That's not a question that we've specifically discussed, Councillor Cooper. As I say, that study area is directional, so rather than definitive. So I don't think I can answer that specific question.
Well, that's fine. I just was curious as to sort of the extent of it, but it certainly would be nice if it included the Benjamin Islands or something quite extraordinary. So anyway, just wanted to ask that question, but thank you very much for what you're doing here. I think it's a very exciting project. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Predko, please.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. My question is really around how do you, and I know this is early days and you don't have answers, but you're not anticipating creating a planning authority, and yet you're going to be overlapping and working with countless associations, land trusts, government agencies, the federal parks, the provincial parks. How do you foresee this sort of streamlining some of these entities and becoming maybe a larger group without being an authority that will help, manage this preservation area effort without contradicting or having to overstep boundaries with other associations?
Good question. It isn't really about streamlining the current organizations or authorities. Rather, it's about coalescing around a set of guiding principles and under what framework can those best be brought forward, which would be some kind of document or perhaps Ontario regulation potentially, but it would not be, when we say it would not be a planning authority, what we mean is that it would not usurp any of the current authorities over local planning.
Okay, thank you. And part of my question is directed to, right now we support the Georgian Bay Association, we support the biosphere, we support through regulation Severn Sound. We also support other areas around through Georgian Bay. My only concern is that this is one more organization that we will need to support, and I would hope that some of these could begin to work together to coalesce their efforts and not overlap the efforts that each is making. So hopefully through your framework and regulations that you're hoping to achieve, that will be part of the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, and just piggybacking, excuse me, on the comments made by Councillor Predko and through the mayor. One great presentation. I think this is a wonderful idea. It's sort of a long time coming, putting everything together and trying to do things communally, in a manner of speaking. I am concerned and hope that the Indigenous communities are I know they're going to be encouraged to come on board, but I do hope they do come on board. Do you have any indication early on here what the Indigenous community thinking is with regards to this organization?
No, because we have been seeking guidance on outreach to Indigenous communities. Now, yes, I've met with a couple, but I wouldn't say that that has provided an answer to your question, Councillor Jarvis. We're working certainly with closely with the biosphere on this outreach because they have a great deal of practical experience and some good connections with local First Nations in the region. And we are also being informed by other experts. So, for example, with this advisory council, we've been advised that it isn't necessarily an appropriate model to appoint a few representatives, so-called, of Indigenous communities to such a council, because that isn't the way that they prefer to work, and they don't hold themselves out as representing specific communities. So it may be that we will set up a roundtable to garner input and participation from Indigenous communities.
Thank you. I think that their advice, despite what's been suggested with regards to the advisory council, I think advisory would be the best way to describe any input they could provide, since they have long-standing tenure in the area and know it better than any of us. But thank you very much.
Agreed.
Thank you. Not seeing other hands raised at this point. I'd like to make a few comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Hazelton to introduce your new business item, if that's okay with you, Councillor Hazelton. A couple of comments. I fully agree with Councillor Jarvis that I think the Indigenous communities need to be involved at some stage in this process in some form that's fitting for them. I want to add that I applaud your addition of supporting sustainable communities, because I think that absolutely has to be part of whatever vision you come up with, is to recognize the various communities up and down the shoreline and the role that they play in the area. I also greatly appreciate your references to, for instance, the land trust and the biosphere, both of which were in our office, in our council chambers yesterday, as a matter of fact. And I made the comment then, and I'm going to repeat it today, is that we are blessed in this area to have so many organizations, so many residents, citizens working as hard as they do to protect the natural environment around us, and and the education that goes with it and everything else. And I think that we should consider ourselves very fortunate to have so many people supporting an area that we sometimes take for granted, and we shouldn't, because we are exceptionally blessed to be able to be in this area and appreciate the natural environment around us. And so I applaud that. And I think if Vision 2050 only increases the knowledge and education of the area, it will be a major achievement. But I know your ambitions are much more than that, but I applaud your efforts. And with that comment, I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Hazelton to introduce your new business item, please, sir.
So everybody has a copy. Councillor Jarvis, did you find it? So the report part is actually referencing the 2050 vision and the delegation. And I think one of the things that's important about all of this is that we in our council and our activities here, we tend to think in 4, 8, maybe 12-year increments. And what this is attempting to do is bring together the stakeholders up and down the shoreline to focus on a much longer term vision. And I think that we have already seen the GBA's actions over the last many years trying to bring various communities together and sharing ideas to assist in planning and other matters. But this is really a much longer term vision and a big challenge that we need to, I think, step up to and participate in. And I would like to modify the last statement and the recommendation, and therefore it be resolved that Council appoint Councillor Cooper to the Georgian Bay Association's Vision 2050 Project Advisory Council.
Thank you very much. I will read the entire motion and then turn it over to council for discussion. It's moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Whereas the Georgian Bay Association has established their Vision 2050 Project Advisory Council, and whereas the Georgian Bay Association has requested a member of the Township of Georgian Bay Council to be appointed to the Vision 2050 Project Advisory Council, now therefore be it resolved that council appoint councillor, and it's been proposed Councillor Cooper, to the Georgian Bay Association's Vision 2050 Project Advisory Council. Council, any discussion on that motion? All right. Oh, Councillor Bochek.
Thank you. And I guess there was something printed here that I wasn't aware of. And I was just wondering if this is open for nominations for any other member of our council.
Absolutely. That's up. This is part of our new business item 10. Absolutely. Councillor Hazelton proposed Councillor Cooper. If you have suggestions of others, we can discuss that as well.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to nominate Steve Jarvis, Councillor Steve Jarvis, being an active member on the Bay, as well as Mr. Cooper is. But I would like to nominate Steve Jarvis if somebody would like to second that, if they need to.
Actually, what I failed to do, and thank you very much for that nomination, I'm going to turn to Councillors Cooper and Jarvis and ask whether either of you are willing to accept such a nomination, because if you're not, we should remove your name. Councillor Cooper.
Yes, I'd like to be able to work on this project, and would be happy to have my name come forward. I think I can bring some things to the table that might benefit the objective in the long run. So that's why I'd be happy to stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
I'd be willing to stand, and I appreciate the nomination, though I think that Councillor Cooper's experience with the GBLT and his time on the Bay might stand him in better stead than myself in this position, and I would be supporting his nomination.
Okay, thank you.
In that case, then, through you, Mayor, I too would like to support Councillor Cooper because he does have the most knowledge that I know of. A little bit different knowledge than what Councillor Jarvis has, but if you need counsel, I guess you're going to have a vote on this anyways, are you?
That's where we're going to end up.
All right, then I'll just turn my mic off and be quiet.
For now.
For now.
Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, through your worship. Per Councillor Hazelton's motion, I wonder, and I pose this to the mover and seconder, as to whether or not there could be someone from the inland side as well on this as maybe a delegate or someone that could potentially participate, maybe in an unofficial capacity. I know myself, I'd love to learn more about the Bay and everything that happens within the Bay. And so I'm wondering whether or not our mover and seconder would consider that and advise accordingly. Thank you.
Mr. Carson.
Thank you. I wanted to offer that I mentioned the archipelago. The Deputy Reeve Sheard of the archipelago expressed a very strong interest in this project. He is not the councillor who was nominated by Archipelago to be on our advisory group. That is Councillor Peter Frost. But Deputy Reeve Sheard has expressed a strong interest in being kept informed and being involved, and we have undertaken to do that with him. He is also designated as the alternate to Councillor Frost. So we're very much open to that approach here with your council. Just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Councillor Bochek, you weren't quiet for long.
I never am. Good thing this is Cal. I kind of like the idea that Councillor Graziano brought forward, because there is a lot of inland waters that are associated with the waters of Georgian Bay. They flow into each other, they rely on each other. So I would like to propose an alternate being Councillor Graziano.
Councillor Cooper.
I'd be happy to second that.
Okay.
And I'm sure that's quite agreeable, as already pointed out by the organization. So I think it's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Councillor Graziano, would you accept such a nomination?
I'm honored that my fellow councillors have suggested that, and yes, I will accept. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to add an extra line to, presuming that Councillors Hazelton and Jarvis are open to it, we're going to add an extra line to your motion. Your mic was on, so I don't know if they caught that whisper.
Yeah, they got that. It's now been
you're
recorded.
objecting, Councillor Hazelton?
And no objections here.
Oh, thank you. All right. I'm going to read the motion and we'll take the vote. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, second by Councillor Jarvis, whereas the Georgian Bay Association has established their Vision 2050 Project Advisory Council, and whereas the Georgian Bay Association has requested a member of the Township of Georgian Bay Council be appointed to the Vision 2050 Project Advisory Council, now therefore be it resolved that Council appoint Councillor Cooper to the Georgian Bay Association Vision 2050 Project Advisory Council and Councillor Graziano as the alternate. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right. Messrs. Carson and Jones, thank you very much for your presentation. And we have, as council, followed up on your request, and you now have name of councillors. And if you could keep the entire council, or at the very least the mayor, apprised of your progress on this, it would be greatly appreciated.
We will certainly do that, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. We are grateful.
Thank you. We appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Well, I know. Okay, well, let's now move into the planning application staff report section of our agenda, or item 9. And we are going to, the first item there is with regards to zoning bylaw amendment file Z25-02 for 4 Clerks Road. And Ms. McCabe, I see your name on the top of this presentation.
Thank you, Worship. Good morning, members of council and Your Worship. This is a pretty straightforward application. As you're aware, we have gone through the process with this particular property. We started out with a public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment, which did put a hold on the property for the landscaping business. And it is an existing business, and at this time, there's no intent of expanding the business or enlarging it in any way. Under the zoning, the hold was put on the property in order to have the owner enter into a site plan agreement. This is now complete. It is registered on title, and now the owner has come back and asked for the holding to be removed, which in this case is basically a formality, as like I stated, the site plan agreement has been registered. So any questions, I'm here to answer.
I'll ask one before I turn over to council. And if we could stop the screen sharing, it'd be appreciated. But is this the last step then in this whole process?
Through Your Worship, yes, it is. It's
Okay,
the final step.
Council, any questions or comments before I read the motion? All right. I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, second by Councillor Predko. Be it resolved that council receives Development Services Report 2025-049 and approves Bylaw 2025-032, being a zoning bylaw amendment, Z25-02, to remove a holding symbol H on the lands legally described as Lot 3, Concession 4, being Part 1, Plan 35R-5761, and Parts 5 and 9 on Plan 35R-2879, subject to a right-of-way over Part 5, Plan 35R-2879, in the Township of Georgian Bay, District of Muskoka. Councillor Jarvis.
Very quickly, and I just a matter of semantics, I think possibly the mover and seconder on this motion are the two members of the Committee of Adjustment that approved it. I don't know if that would give the appearance of any kind of conflict or not, but I thought I'd make that observation. Clerk White?
Being the mover and seconder just means that you think it needs to be on the table to be voted on.
And through your worship, it did not go to the Committee of Adjustment. It was zoning bylaw amendment, so it was approved by council.
Excuse me. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
There, your concern has been doubly removed. I'm going to then call the vote. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. I think all of them have been carried unanimously so far. So now we're going to move on to zoning bylaw amendment Z24-14 for 227 Huron Trail. And Ms. Wanfor, you have returned in time for this presentation.
Thank you, and through the mayor. The subject property has an area of 10,400 square meters with approximately 90 meters of frontage onto 6 Mile Lake. A detached dwelling and accessory pickleball court occupy the lands. The property is forested with mature trees, except for clearing around the dwelling and driveway. The lands are designated waterfront within the district and township official plans and are zoned 6 Mile Lake residential, exception 1. A public meeting was held on March 4th, 2025 for the purpose of conveying information and gathering comments. No members of the public were present to comment or oppose the proposal. The applicant advised that they are going to pursue approval from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, voiced their intention to not negatively impact the environment, and that Taylor Docks will construct the proposed dock, stating that they are familiar with the lake and will adhere to construction mitigation measures. The applicant also informed council that they have a kayak and canoe they would like to moor on the moor on the dock, as opposed to disrupting the shoreline, and that they will have a small boat in the future like their neighbors. One member of council suggested a floating dock, for which the chief building official advised that a floating dock requires anchors, which are typically large blocks of cement, whereas in most cases the overall footprint of the piles on a pile dock cover less of the lake bed. And the director of planning explained that both the applicants and the township's environmental consultants expressed no preference on the design of the dock, and both concluded that the proposed dock would not have an impact on the fish habitat. Another member of council voiced concerns with propeller wash on the fish habitat. The purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to amend the zoning bylaw to facilitate the construction of a dock having an increased length of 16.2 meters, whereas 10 meters is permitted, within a fish habitat type 1 zone, whereas a setback of 5 meters from a fish habitat type 1 zone is required. The provincial planning statement states that development and site alteration shall not be permitted in fish habitat except in accordance with provincial and federal requirements. Provincial and federal requirements means legislation and policies administered by the federal or provincial governments for the purpose of fisheries protection. Fisheries and Oceans Canada, or DFO, is a department of the Government of Canada that is responsible for developing and implementing policies and programs in support of Canada's economic, ecological, and scientific interest in ocean and inland waters. Staff are recommending that a hold be placed on the subject lands, for which the condition for its removal is receiving approval from the DFO. The lands are located within a deer wintering area known as Stratum 2, partially within an extreme wildfire hazard rating area, and are identified as having moderate to high archaeological potential. Development or site alteration in Stratum 2 deer habitat should conserve valuable conifer thermal cover, feeding areas, and movement corridors. In accordance with the official plan, development shall generally be directed to areas outside of lands that are unsafe for development due to the presence of hazardous forest types. The district and/or township may request an assessment be undertaken by a professional where development is proposed in areas identified as extreme, high, and needs evaluation. Both district and township staff did not require an assessment for the dock. Objectives of the waterfront area include protecting the ecological features and functions of lakes, rivers, and shorelines, encouraging the conservation of the overall landscape, including but not limited to tree cover and vegetation, protecting fish and wildlife resources in and around water bodies, etc. The district official plan provides general policies such as, but not limited to, recognizing the waterfront area as a major recreation resource area that should be made accessible to both public and private users. Natural form and function shall be the predominant characteristic of the landscape, and new development should generally have a physical character similar to or compatible with existing development in terms of density, lot sizes, maximum building heights, and minimum setbacks. Type 1 fish habitats require the highest level of protection because of their specific sensitivity and importance to local fish populations. A fish habitat assessment undertaken by a qualified professional at the appropriate time of year and using recognized protocols shall generally be required for development within or adjacent to Type 1 habitat. To confirm, Tarandis Associates Limited provided an assessment in support of the application and has made revisions to address comments and concerns posed by Hutchinson Environmental Sciences Limited, being the township's consultants. The environmental impact study in Hutchinson's peer review concluded the dock itself is not likely to have an impact on the fish habitat. Note that all other properties in this bay have a dock which appear to be legal non-complying, having existed since at least 2008, and or a building permit was obtained for reconstruction of one that existed previously. The lands are designated waterfront within the 6 Mile Lake Inland Waterfront Community. The plan states, in general, the size of shoreline structures should not exceed a maximum width of 15% of the lot frontage and a maximum projection into the water of 10 meters. Variances to the general standards for the size and location of shoreline structures should only be considered where it is not possible to meet the requirement. Note that the applicant has informed staff the increased dock length is required to achieve a water depth of 3 feet for a small boat. The plan also states that shoreline structures shall shall be located in such a manner as to minimize the visual impact on neighboring properties and shall avoid sensitive natural heritage features and areas. The dock exceeds the minimum side yard setback requirement, and the entirety of the shoreline is within Type 1 fish habitat. Plan also states, for new development, a 15-meter setback is required from warm water fish habitat. Reduced setbacks may be considered where it has been demonstrated through the submission of an impact assessment that there will be no negative impact on the habitat. Similarly, this section requires an impact assessment be submitted to the satisfaction of the township, demonstrating that there will be no negative impact on the natural features or ecological function of the habitat, except in accordance with provincial and federal policies and regulations, prior to development occurring on lands within 120 meters of this fish habitat. To confirm, the environmental consultants agree that the dock is not likely to cause impacts to the surrounding fish habitat, and staff are recommending we ensure DFO approval is received prior to any construction by placing a hold on the lands, which is a tool available to us under the Planning Act. The applicant will need to apply to remove the hold once DFO approval is received, and Council has the authority to pass a bylaw to remove the hold. Subject lands are Zone 6 Mile Lake Residential Exception 1, which permits a detached dwelling and accessory uses thereto. The exception requires a minimum front yard of 30 meters. In the 6 Mile Lake Residential Zone, docks are limited to a width of 3.1 meters and a maximum length or projection of 10 meters. The proposed dock has a width of 3.05 meters and a length of 16.2 meters. As noted previously, the dock length is required to achieve a water depth of 3 feet. The dock will be supported by 12 metal pilings covering 0.15 square meters of the lake bed, and the surface will consist of wooden planks. In accordance with provision 4.5E of the zoning bylaw, the minimum required setback from a fish habitat type 1 is 5 meters. Hutchinson Environmental Associates Limited's letter dated February 13, 2025 concluded that construction mitigation measures are necessary and their concern is primarily related to impacts to fish habitat as a result of boat traffic. They state numerous recreational vessels passing over the habitat will disturb spawning fish with noise, sediment, and propeller wash. Tarandis Associates Limited provided a list of construction mitigation measures and confirmed that such will be provided to Taylor Docks, being the dock construction company that the applicant has retained, and Tarandis has also included their professional comments regarding boat traffic in this letter. Planning staff are recommending council approve the zoning bylaw amendment with a holding provision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any question or discussion? Councillor Bochek, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I don't have any problems with the applicant or the hold being put on the property. My comment is, for the last 10 or 12 years, we've really asked the planning department to name the bodies of water on your maps. If you look at all your maps, there's no bodies of water. It doesn't say 6 Mile or Heather Bay or Leduc Bay or anything else. Many of us councillors travel by water through Navionics, and we don't travel by road. And so the practice has been in the past that all bodies of water, all bays, all streams, whatever, would be named so that when we're looking at it, we know exactly what we're looking at. And I think the rest of council will know what I'm talking about, because this has been something we've really tried to enforce over the years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. I'm going to make an observation. I just think it's important that we understand that under the PPS, in which I'm going to just pull up the quote, section 4.1, which contains policy on natural heritage features, it says specifically, quote, the diversity and connectivity of natural features in an area and the long-term ecological function and biodiversity of natural heritage systems should be maintained, restored, or where possible improved. I don't think we're adhering to that on a lot of the stuff we do. I think it's important that we keep that in mind while we're making these decisions. There was also a note in that in the report that was a Tantalus or whoever it is that does the report about the removal of natural debris from the area where the dock is going to be on the lake bed. I voiced concern about prop wash initially. I see that was taken into consideration. I appreciate that. But I don't see us adhering to that PPS statement. You can't look at it in isolation, I understand that. But I think it's something we've got to really think hard about when we're doing or recommending these types of requests from people. I know the docks are essential to have access to properties and for things like kayaks and small boats. I'm not disputing that at all, but I do worry that we are, over the long term, we keep allowing all this stuff go on. We're just going to rule out any natural features entirely because of all the docks that go into the lake, especially in shallow areas. And that is my concern, and strictly an observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Planner. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is the last photo that you had up indicated sort of the aerial of the area, and particularly I just wanted to know about if you had any concerns about the distance of this dock from the neighboring dock, which is literally right at the corner where one property joins another. So is that sufficient distance? It's 25 meters. What's that, 75 feet, I guess? 80 feet. Is that enough for vessels to maneuver and not run into each other and Has there been any thought given to that? That was my first question.
Through the mayor, I'm just looking at that image now, and I'm not sure if it was, if the dock was actually shown to scale in terms of its location. I do know, and as you mentioned, the dock will be set back a minimum of 25 meters from that side lot line where we only require 5. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, it's pretty, you can see from, it's not on your diagrams, but it is on the photo that the last photo you showed where the neighbor's dock was, which was literally right at the border between the two properties. So, you know, it's probably fine. I just thought I'd mention that there's a fair bit of adjacency there between the two docks. The second question I had, and this is really kind of an obscure question, but it comes from your attachment 3 from the report, where it shows all the shoreline, where the fish habitat is, etc. It's the elevations. It's attachment 3. I'm sure this isn't a dock, but it looks like a dock. It's 41 meters and 85. That's just showing a distance, I'm assuming. The first sort of most left part of the diagram shows this great big long, looks like a dock to me, but I'm sure it's not. I just wanted to clarify that's not another dock, is it? It's a road allowance, maybe extended into the water, or it's a measurement, I think maybe you're trying to show. It so happens it looks like a dock.
Through the mayor, there's only 2 attachments plus the bylaw to the report. Perhaps you're referring to a different attachment number?
It's from your report, and it's third page, I believe.
Third
Attachment
page.
3 contains a draft bylaw, etc. And if you look at that,
Bylaw.
It's showing
the distance.
The green line is the property line, and then the black line is where the show.
And I was pretty sure of that. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't another. It looks like a dock. A big dock. Anyway, thank you. It's not a dock.
And thank goodness we didn't see that in the aerial photos either. Councillor Predko.
Thank you. You are just distracted by looking for this errant dock. The one thing that you've made in your presentation, and we've talked about, I think, are some of the construction mitigation measures, but we don't have any conditions on the resolution to include those construction mitigation measures, like the sediment and erosion control, the avoiding vegetation removal. Is there anything that we can do to add a condition to the resolution? Or I know we have done that in committee of adjustment, but I haven't seen that maybe in a zoning application.
Through the mayor, I don't believe we are able to have conditions attached to a zoning bylaw amendment. However, my understanding is the DFO, should they approve this dock, will have a list of practices that whoever's constructing the dock, in this case likely Taylor Docks, will have to adhere to, which would ensure environmental protection. And again, that's if DFO approves the dock.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I hear from a number of councillors and certainly from our staff, the concern of the, I'll call it, environmental footprint of this structure. And I greatly appreciate, between the studies done and the hold requiring DFO approval, that I think a lot of steps have been taken to minimize the impact of this dock. There are going to be a few holes stuck into the ground. In my mind, given all those steps, I think that I just appreciate that we're doing our best to minimize the impact, because I think that is very important. But I think we also have to recognize that if we're going to allow human habitat within our township, which obviously we are, all of us have environmental footprints, whether we want to admit it or not. But I say I applaud the effort to minimize those that footprint, especially in the more sensitive areas of our township. The motion reads, moved by Councillor Predko, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council receives Development Service Report 2025-050 and approves Bylaw 2025-033, being a zoning bylaw amendment Z24-14 to rezone the lands legally described as Lot 3 on Plan M-638, part of Lot 19, Concession 10, in the Township of Georgian Bay, District Municipality Muskoka, and are municipally known as 227 Huron Trail, to a 6 Mile Lake Exception 65 zone with a hold, namely SR6-65 bracket H17. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that is passed. Thank you very much. And our final application under this section of our agenda is for zoning bylaw amendment application Z24-11 with regards to floating accommodations. And Director Whitlam, this is your report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll leave my presentation to a verbal one. This is a matter that's been before council on a number of occasions. The land use issue of floating accommodations, to my knowledge, goes back to 2021. This municipality and others have been very active, as have members of the community, in working with various levels of government to come up with a regulatory framework. Some of the work in this respect was pioneered by one of the deputations we heard this morning under open forum, the Floating Accommodations Not Vessels Coalition. And also a lot of groundwork from a zoning approach was taken by our neighbor municipality, the Township of Severn, after which the proposed bylaw before council today is largely modeled. Council will recall that this has been through a public consultation process, which is included in September 2024, a public open house. We had a number of comments, questions, suggestions about the proposed bylaw, some recommendations for wording and some improvements, and it was followed by a statutory public meeting in October of 2024. And there were also some comments that came out of that. I will note that none of the comments during those meetings or to date have expressed opposition or objection to the bylaw. They were of a nature of either asking questions for clarification or suggesting improvements, a number of which, most of which have been incorporated into the bylaw before council today. There was also ongoing work being undertaken by the Floating Accommodations Not Vessels Coalition, which is, I think, largely completed, and they expect, I believe, to be releasing, I think they refer to it as a position paper, but that work has largely also informed this process. So we have before you a bylaw largely in the form that council's seen before. I do want to make note to one correction in the staff report on page 2. It refers to the provincial regulation regarding occupation of public lands. The report speaks to Ontario Regulation 171-17. It's actually Ontario Regulation 161-17. And just to refresh your memory, what that regulation did, and that's the regulation that, among other things, deals with camping on Crown land. That's sort of been its traditional application. But it also captures Crown lake beds, which is most of Georgian Bay, except in circumstances where there are water lots which may extend under the surface of the water, which are not common. And whereas on Crown land, one may camp for a maximum period of 21 days in any one spot. With the amendment to the regulation by the province, which the province undertook in 2023, was it added a new definition to that regulation called floating accommodations. That same definition is carried forward into the proposed bylaw that's before you today. And what the province did was by adding that definition of floating accommodations, but not including it in the regulation among the list of permitted activities on Crown land. It defines campsite, it defines hunt camp, it defines a trapper's cabin, and a number of other activities. By excluding it from that list, what the province did was prohibit floating accommodations over Crown lake beds. And that captures most of the, as I indicated, most of Georgian Bay as well as inland lakes, because those lake beds are Crown. But we do on occasion have water lots that extend onto the lake bed. And of course, we have the Trent-Severn Waterway, which is federal. As the report notes, in 2024, Parks Canada, with respect to the Trent-Severn Waterway, beefed up its mooring regulations to effectively prohibit the mooring of floating accommodations in the Trent-Severn Waterway. And in terms of water lots, what this approach by the township would do, it adds another layer of regulation through the zoning bylaw to prohibit floating accommodations in all lands, zones, waters, etc. within the township. And it would provide the ability to prohibit floating accommodations in those circumstances where there is a water lot extending beneath the surface of the water. So it sort of just closes that loop. So I think I will leave my comments at that and put it to council in terms of if you have any questions. I will note that the staff report contains a sort of a track changes version of all the proposed sections of the bylaw to be amended and how they would read as amended. So I'll turn it back to the mayor and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councilor Graziano, please.
Thank you, Worship. I have a couple of comments and then a few questions for Director of Planning. So I'm going to request a little bit of latitude. If at any time you feel that perhaps I should add the additional questions to my second round, I'll be happy to cede and pass on the Q&A for the first round over to my fellow councillors. But I do want to express my full support for this bylaw. Personally, I feel that our residents have waited years for action on floating accommodations, and this represents a major step forward in protecting our lakes, our shorelines, and our quality of life. I also want to commend staff for the consultation process and for ensuring that the bylaw reflects both the public feedback and the evolutionary, regulatory framework from both the provincial and federal levels. I think it's been great that our staff has really stepped up and made this happen. I also want to say that this bylaw demonstrates our municipality's leadership in proactively managing environmental concerns, our public safety, and of course, fair taxation. And I hopefully look forward to its successful implementation. Now, with that said, I have a couple of questions, and if I can, I'll direct those to our director and perhaps some of our bylaw staff as well. And my first question is really, how have we consulted with legal counsel on the enforceability of this bylaw across all zones or zoning and navigable waterways, with the township, especially in the context of Crown lands and areas bordering federal jurisdiction?
Through the mayor to council. So the Crown lands piece is clear, and under the 171.17 occupation of public lands, and this just adds again another layer of enforceability. In terms of consultation with legal counsel, we have not asked legal counsel to review this bylaw. In speaking with our colleagues at the Township of Severn, their experience has been, in terms of their review with their legal counsel, that it's not entirely known in terms of, until this bylaw is tested, it's believed to be sound. But if there is a challenge, we would have to address it at that time. So staff did not, in this case, choose to expend funds on a comprehensive review by our legal counsel, given that we had some feedback from our neighboring municipality who did have some legal input into the process.
Fair, and I appreciate that, and thank you for that answer. And now, hearing that we've benchmarked with regards to similar bylaws that were passed by Severn, I'm wondering whether we also benchmarked and considered the Rideau Canal corridor to ensure consistency and defensibility. So, has there been any reference to that corridor and what they've approved as well?
Through the mayor to council. So if I'm understanding the question correctly in the reference to the Rideau Canal corridor, my familiarity in that respect is with regard to the work that Parks Canada did on the Rideau Canal, which is similarly regulated as the Trent Severn is. So they Parks Canada did do a similar mooring regulation on the Rideau Canal as they did here on the Trent Severn. So that's my knowledge of that topic.
Thank you. Fair enough. How do we intend on enforcing in remote water access only areas, and what resources or partnerships are in place to support the enforcement of our new bylaw?
So I'll speak to my knowledge of that through the mayor to council. There has been in staff's view some enforcement action taken. I believe there's current enforcement underway by the Ministry of Natural Resources with respect to Crown Lake bed. And as part of that, there was at least one instance where OPP were involved in the township, also involved in enforcement, where it dealt with a situation as to whether the mooring might be over Crown Lake bed or private property. So we do know that agencies are undertaking enforcement. I don't know if any of those have come to a resolution yet, but the agencies, specifically the MNR, Ministry of Natural Resources, and OVP have been involved and have actively engaged in enforcement.
Two more questions, Your Worship, and then I'll pass it on, and thank you for your understanding. With regards to the bylaw, have we incorporated any monitoring review mechanisms? I don't think I saw one, and I just wanted to make sure that we've considered some kind of mechanism in place for monitoring and reviewing the movement as well as the enforcement of perhaps the bylaw. So do we have anything that specifically states that we'll monitor and review periodically, and or if so, how?
Through the mayor to Councillor Graziano, is the question related to monitoring and review of floating accommodation units, or monitoring and review of the bylaw itself?
The floating accommodation units, correct.
Yeah, I mean, that would simply be undertaken on an ongoing basis from an enforcement standpoint. I think township municipal law staff have a good handle on, or in my experience, have had a good handle on the movements of units in the past in the township. But I don't know if I'm looking at municipal law, if you want to speak to any sort of review or monitoring that might be done.
Through your worship, we have really good connections right now with enforcement officers from other levels of government, being the MNR, Parks Canada, and the OPP. And also many people in the public know to reach out to us on the location of these and where they're going. So we have appeared to be the first point of contact, and we'll continue to monitor throughout the season what the goal is. And we do have a working group that we are working with as well with different municipalities on the current status in other areas as well.
Thank you for clarity. And I have one final question and specific to definitions, particularly between floating accommodations. Oh, did we drop? Can everyone still hear me?
Yes, we can. And we
okay, excellent. Sorry, my screen dropped here. So my question pertains to definitions, particularly between floating accommodations versus liveaboard vessels. Have we been able to structure or avoid unintended loopholes or misinterpretations by way of strengthening our definitions? And I want to make sure that there really isn't a way around, classifying this as something different, albeit it's the old saying, if it quacks like a duck and if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. So I want to make sure that we've addressed the potential for ambiguity, specifically around the definitions and being classified as a floating accommodation versus a liveaboard vessel. So over to planning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Graziano. Excellent question. And through the mayor, so one point I wish to make is the bylaw attempts to be very clear to distinguish between floating accommodations and liveaboard vessels, and in no way would affect or regulate liveaboard vessels. The definition itself of floating accommodations comes from the OREG, the provincial reg 16117 under the Public Lands Act, and it's carried through verbatim, and that's something, that consistency in that definition, which is also found in the Townships of Severn's bylaw And that consistency was something that it was identified both by staff as being important, as well as the community coalition that has done research on this topic. So we're using that definition that's identical in all respects to make sure we're all regulating the same thing. We believe it will be effective. Can we rule out somebody finding and exploiting a loophole? I guess that's to be seen, to be quite candid.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Your Worship, for allowing me with the questions that I have.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And I have only 20 questions. No, I'm fooling. I have a couple. First of all, just with respect to the use you're making of other municipalities and their bylaws, I'd like to commend you on doing that. Oh, I'm going to start singing now. I just wanted to commend the activity of sort of checking where other work has already been done. Why would we want to repeat it? So I think that's, I'm delighted that you've done that. So thank you for that. And in terms of just, it came to me, and I'm sorry I haven't mentioned this before, but, and you may be aware of this, but we have one place in our township that has quite sort of a unique water situation, which is the Tadnack Club. And you were aware of, I think, the Tadnack Club. Are you aware of the Act of Parliament and what relates to that land? So there's basically, I don't know, it's about 5,000 or more acres in the Tadnack Club, but a lot of it's water. And it's my understanding that about 150 years ago, there was an Act of Parliament, an Order in Council, I think it was called, whereby the Crown sold the land. I don't think it's ever been done before, but all the land under the water, essentially. Does this cover that specific situation?
Through the mayor to council as a whole and to Councillor Cooper. So staff are aware of the Tadnack Club and its situation. In a general context, I don't know the particulars of the statute. I suspect that it could mean that while there may be a situation where that Crown Lake bed may not be enforceable under the Public Lands Act, this zoning bylaw still applies to all lands and waters. So if there's a township enforcement action, the township could still, a need for a township enforcement action, the township could still enforce its zoning bylaw, but it may be a situation, a unique situation where there may not be a provincial violation, but there could still be a township or a municipal violation. If there was an unauthorized or a floating accommodation moored there. Something I should have mentioned also just came to mind during this process is nothing about this bylaw amendment prevents a proponent of a floating accommodation to seek a zoning bylaw amendment on their own to try and obtain some sort of permission. This is, bylaws are always amendable, but this is a blanket bylaw that would apply to the entire township. But again, someone seeking either to establish a floating accommodation in a location would have the option of coming to council, applying for a zoning bylaw amendment and going through a public process.
The short answer, it's covered off. And that applies to floating accommodations, but frankly, any vessels at all. In this particular case I'm talking about now, you're not allowed to go over their land.
That's an understanding I've heard. I can't say that, Councillor Cooper, that I'm particularly knowledgeable of those particulars, but I understand that they are essentially private waters.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. I have a question for our Director of Planning. Just to reconfirm, I think I've heard you say it, but I sometimes like hearing things 2 or 3 times. So if a marina today has a water lot and they have been issued, or the water lot is controlled by M&R, you, I think, said that this bylaw controls the ability of positioning a floating home within that water lot.
The short answer is that is correct.
Okay, so the next question I have is, how does this, or can it, apply to existing float homes?
So right now, to my knowledge, there are no existing floating homes.
I have one.
Sorry, I'm thinking of the water lot situation.
Okay.
Yeah, in a water lot situation. To my knowledge, there would be no legal non-conforming status in a situation like that.
So not in a
At
water
present.
lot, but we do have one floating home existing in South Annie Harbor. Can you help us understand the implications of this bylaw on that?
I'm not aware of that one. I'm aware of a floating home further north in the municipality.
This is something that's been there for a long time, hooked up to the shore, sold as an Airbnb.
Yeah, that one has not been brought to staff's attention.
We need to talk
about that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jarvis.
Yeah, quickly, I think you just addressed one of my two questions, and that was with there are two current situations on the Georgian Bay. One is, of course, with regards to the floating homes that were brought to our attention way back when this whole thing before us. They're currently tied up, I believe, is a tiny township. I'm just curious to know if anything is ongoing with our neighboring township on specifically on that floating accommodation sitting on that dock right off the 400 so that everybody can see it, which is really nice. That's my first question. And two, you already mentioned, we can dispose of this really quickly, you're aware of another floating accommodation that's further up the shore. That's another one I was worried about. Would that one be legally non-conforming and therefore not be affected by this bylaw?
So to answer the first question, after I'm done answering the second question, I think municipal law staff could speak to those ones to some extent, the ones in the adjacent municipality. The one further north, from staff standpoint, that's a floating accommodation moored over Crown Lake bed, and it would be in violation of 161.17, the OREG. In terms of whether there's been an enforcement or a complaint, that's a provincial matter. This municipal bylaw, the situation there could potentially be legal non-conforming in terms of this bylaw if passed, but I can't speak to how that situation would be addressed from a provincial regulation standpoint, other than it's my opinion that it's likely in violation of the OREG.
Interesting, and thank you.
Yeah, I guess the question would be whether that existing situation had any planning approval or not when it was placed there. And I'm going to go to the bylaw staff if you could make any comments on the floating accommodations in Tiny.
Yeah. So through your worship, yeah, they're in Township, right there at the hotel. You could see off of the 400. We have spoke with Tay staff, planning, and municipal law enforcement, and there's really nothing under their zoning bylaw that they have right now. Tay is part of our working group and looking at our bylaw being passed as well as Severn's passed. But from speaking with their law enforcement that went on site to speak with the owner of those floating accommodations is that once the ice is broken, they'll be vacating that lot. But going where is the unknown question as of right now.
Councilor Hazelton.
So I'm going to redirect my question from our Director of Planning to bylaw enforcement. So I don't know if it was you or one of your predecessors, but they have been out to this floating accommodation in South Honey Harbor and claimed that it was moored to a commercial property, whereas the map seems to show that it's moored to a residential property. But given this new bylaw, what will your ruling be on that?
Through your worship to Council Hazelton, after this meeting, we'll have a conversation with planning staff about the specifics. I know the one that you're speaking to in its location that's been there for many of years, whether that does have the legal non-conforming which that will apply, or does it meet the definition of floating accommodation? I don't have the definition right in front of me, but if floating accommodation, if it is a boat that is able to propel itself, may not actually meet the definition. So we'll have to take a look at that with some of the documentation we may have on it from previous and go from there. So I don't have a clear answer right now, but it is something we can look into.
So follow up, if I may. So I think the bylaw as written indicates that whatever this thing is may have an ability to self-propel. Correct? That's what the bylaw says. Right? So you just said something that I'm confused about, because you suggested that if it has self-propel, it may be considered something different, but this bylaw explicitly says it could be self-propelled or towed or moved or whatever. So now I'm confused about the strength of the bylaw, because if somebody takes this anything and puts a motor on it, now it's self-propelled. Does that change your interpretation of enforcement?
To our Director of Planning.
Thank you. So maybe if it would help to clarify, I'll read the definition in its entirety of floating accommodation. And again, this is replicated also in the provincial regulation. So floating accommodation means a floating building, structure, or thing, or a combination of floating buildings, structures, or things, equipped or usable for overnight accommodation and not primarily used for navigation, and includes a floating building, structure, or thing, or a combination of floating building, structures, or things that, 1, is primarily designed for or able to be used for residential purposes. 2, is a raft, barge, or floating platform that has on top of it a building, structure, vehicle, or thing that may be used for overnight accommodation for camping purposes or as an outdoor accommodation. 3, would reasonably expected to be towed or pushed to be relocated, or is relocated by means of any other type of assistance, or is self-propelled. 4, is equipped with anchors and or jack-up technology or a similar mechanism used to anchor or rise above the surface of the water with or without spud cans. Or 5, has a floating foundation or flotation platform, which may include floats constructed of any material or substance used to assist flotation. So in answer to the question, it could potentially have propulsion. However, the definition speaks to what the structure is primarily designed for. And the intent there is to distinguish between boats, vessels, which are primarily designed for navigation, versus something like a floating accommodation, which the definition attempts to address as being something primarily constructed for accommodation.
So, Mayor, I would like to suggest that this is a conversation where we could go down all kinds of discussion. I would prefer not to do that today. I'm fully supportive of your resolution. I think we need to get it passed, but I do think we need to collectively get some follow-up here, because this is a floating accommodation that's been moored to land for decades, plumbed to land, and now it's being rented out, we hear, as a short-term rental. So if that's not on your radar screen, you probably need to put that on your radar screen. But this is something we need to look at, but not right now. Thank you.
This is really getting petty. But when I'm looking at the definition, and it has 5 different points in them, I see the occasional or, like OR, not this thing that you propel a boat with, but not after every line. So I'm wondering whether there should be more ors in that definition, or is there an and presumed in between if there's no or? I mean, I'm being really petty legally thing, but I wouldn't want that to be a loophole. Or not.
If I may, through the mayor, thank you. Again, the approach we took was to mirror exactly the provincial definition.
Right down to the ors.
Right down to the ors.
Okay, or lack thereof.
Okay. Working somewhat under the assumption that the province does not go into such things lightly when they amend a provincial regulation. And again, from an enforcement standpoint, all the parties involved, felt it was important that those definitions be very uniform at different
Fair enough.
levels.
Not seeing any more hands. I'm just going to make a comment or two myself, and then we'll go to the actual motion. I greatly appreciate this being in front of council. As some council members and staff know, I've been keen on this getting in front of us, and I'm glad we've achieved that. I think it's very important, as we've noted, this doesn't rule out the possibility of an exception. If somebody wants to come in front of us, just like any other landowner, they can say, I would like site-specific zoning on my particular piece of land that will allow X or Y. And so if somebody out there wants to have a floating accommodation attached to their property, they could ask council through staff to consider that. How we would respond, I guess, would all depend on the nature of that application. But I think having this broad definition and regulation that's consistent with at least one of our neighbors, municipal neighbors, is consistent with the province, consistent with the Parks Canada, I think is a good thing. It certainly confirms, clarifies, strengthens the situation for our bylaw enforcement officers, and I thank you for getting this in front of us. I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Bocheck. Be it resolved that council receives Development Services Report 2025-047 and approves bylaw 2025-034, included as attachment 1 to staff report 2025-047, being a zoning bylaw amendment application Z2411 to amend the Township of Georgian Bay zoning bylaw 2014-75 to prohibit floating accommodations on all lands, islands, water bodies, and navigable waterways within the jurisdiction of the Township of Georgian Bay. And that the words launched and fueled be added to section 8.5, so the definition of marina is amended by adding the following text after the word railways at the end of the definition to read as follows. Floating accommodations are not to be launched, docked, moored, fueled, serviced, repaired, constructed, or kept for sale or rent at a marina. And I've just been told that Councillor Bocheck has left us, I believe, for a medical appointment. So I'm going to ask that we have Councillor Hazelton second that motion. So it's moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is carried. 6 out of 6. Thank you very much. All right. Now we have a bylaw. Moved by, well, it won't be Councillor Bocheck, so we'll make it Councillor Graziano. Moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the Council enact bylaw 2025-035 in regards to Baxter Loop Road assumption. All those in favor? And that is well carried. Moved by Councillor Predko, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved, the Planning Council adopt bylaw 2025-036 to confirm the proceedings of the April 8, 2025 council meeting. All those in favor? And that is carried. And finally, moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved, the Planning Council does now adjourn at 10, does that say 48? 10:48 a.m. until May 6, 2025 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are now adjourned. We have a committee of the whole meeting that starts at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Based on that's when I believe we have a guest to make a presentation to us. So that's a 2-hour lunch break. The other option, Council, before we disappear, is we could start the committee of the whole and address the the new business process improvements item this morning, and then have lunch, and then come back for the procurement.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Graziano, we're going to propose that we're going to start the committee of the whole meeting in, I'm going to call it 10 after 11. And we'll go on to the new business item and committee of the whole until we get hungry. Councilor Cooper?
Yeah, I'm all in favor of that. I just wanted to say that at the outset of that meeting and subject matter that I'd like to make some comments about how we're going to deal with some of those items. The original intent for me was to have maybe one item.
But we'll make that part of the committee of the whole meeting, and that we'll hand the floor over to you once we do the
formalities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.